Rev up your engines!
Rafi says, Scotty, are the new CRV hybrids last 200,000 miles before any major repairs? I can't say. I don't know how much new cars are going to last. They're new, right? That's always the problem of buying a new car, is you don't know how much a new car is going to last. You can go by past experience, but maybe they screwed something up in the new cars, you know? I've seen Toyotas have more problems than they used to have because they're not making them quite as well as they used to be, right? So, on general, the later model CRV hybrids hold up pretty good. I personally am not a hybrid fan, but if I bought a hybrid, I get a Toyota hybrid because they're the kings of the hybrid. Now, Honda has very good engineers, and their hybrids are pretty good. Their first hybrids kind of failed. They were a different design, but now they're the same type of design as the Toyota design. They gave up with their old design. That was a different kind of engine. Now they're more like the Toyota, so they're better than they used to. But I would still get a Toyota hybrid if I was going to get a hybrid. Mondale Rivas says, I got an 03 Dodge Ram 1500. I use it to work daily. 2 days ago, wouldn't turn on, wouldn't crank, not even a dash light. I sent the starter to AutoZone and it passed. Okay, well, numero uno. Your car does nothing. First thing, check the battery. Try to jump start the car. If it jump starts, all right, that means either your battery's bad or you got it drained. Like leaving a flashlight on, eventually the battery will drain, right? Jump start if it starts. If you don't have any tested equipment, go to an auto parts store. They'll test it for free. They'll tell you if the battery's bad, if the alternator's charging, right? That's generally what does that. But, I mean, it is a Dodge, and they are rolling piles of junk. It could be that your anti-theft system's gone bad. And if your anti-theft system goes bad, it won't start. Now, if you got at least another good key like I do in a drawer. I always have spares, right? I try the other key. If it works, and well, the other key's broken, then I'll use the new key, and I'll get another key made and throw the bad one away. Pray it's something simple like that, not something more complex, because it is a Dodge. Even the computers go bad on those things. Barack says, Scotty, Fiat just announced the all-electric Fiat 500. He's coming to the U.S. next year. 118 horsepower, to 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, go 160 miles in a charge. What are your thoughts? Okay, the regular Fiat 500 was a dramatic failure in the United States because Fiat makes crappy vehicles that don't hold up, right? Third year they sold the 500s in the United States. They sold 55,000 of them in that year. The last year they sold them, they don't sell them anymore, they sold 550. They're junk. I wouldn't assume their electric cars are going to be any better. 160 miles in a charge. That's what they say. Just wait to see what happens if you run the AC or run the heat. I would not buy anything Italian electric. The problem with the older Fiats were they had good engines and transmissions, but their electronics were crap. Now they're making a fully electric car. I wouldn't shell my money out for one, I'll tell you that. Sean Aaron says, I'm looking at 2017 Subaru Legacy 3.6 Limited with hail damage for 15 grand at 67,000 miles. Your thoughts? It's got hail damage. It's not worth $15,000. I hate to tell you. The cars are worth money when they're clean. Once they have hail damage, the value goes. I have seen cars in Dallas when I was in Texas. They get a lot of hail in Dallas. The tornadoes and stuff throw a lot of hail, right? I have seen cars totaled from hail damage. It was so bad, it would cost so much to fix the cars. The cars are totaled. But they ran perfectly fine. But they have no real value. Guy's nuts trying to get 15 grand for a car that's full of hail damage. Let him fix the hail damage, then sell it, right? I mean, it could be a good drive-around car, but it's got hail damage. Why bother? I wouldn't waste any money on it. Will White says, what are the best aftermarket shocks for a 2010 Rav4? You know, the KYBs are good, and they're well made. If you can get the ones made in Japan, they make them all over the world now. The Japanese ones are better, right? If you really want to go, put Bilsteins. Those are really good, but they cost 2 to 3 to 4 times more. They're very expensive. But if price is no object, put Bilsteins on it. The Bilsteins are excellent shocks. I mean, there's no arguing that. They're excellent. They cost a lot more, but they're the best. Agora says, you think it's worth buying a car with the size of a hand dent on the door? Depends what you paid for it, which door it is. Now, if it's on the passenger door, you're not looking at it all the time. But if it's on the driver's door, you're going to see it all the time. It's going to drive you nuts. Plus, anything can be fixed. It's a dent on the door. Body shop guys can hammer them back out and repaint them. It's not that big of a deal, you know? But it depends on what price you're paying. People are like crows. They see shiny objects, they want them. They see dented objects, they don't like them. So, if you can get a better price, go right ahead. Caesar64 said, what do you think about buying a Nissan Frontier 2003 with 93,000 miles for 10 grand? Well, they can be very good trucks if that's the real mileage, yes. But it's a 21-year-old truck. There's no way I'd pay 10 grand for that thing. Those are relatively cheap trucks to begin with, right? I know prices are high, but to me, that's a little bit too much money. Now, get a mechanic like me, a good mechanic to check out any used car. You cannot trust sellers. Could be wrecked, flooded, stolen. You don't know. Mechanic in an hour. With our fancy equipment, especially one that's 2003 that's got OBD2, we can tell you what shape it's in. Then you can make a decision, do you want to pay that much money? But never, ever buy any used cars, especially a 21-year-old one, unless mechanic checks it out for you. Unless, of course, you're getting it for nothing. If somebody's giving it to you, they want 10 grand for that one. So I try to talk them down on the price myself. TF said, what are the best cars in the UK, United Kingdom, right? Well, what do you mean by best? Believe it or not, for decades, the biggest selling cars in the United Kingdom are Fords. They sell a lot of Fords, right? Well, if they sell a lot of cars, that means there's a lot of mechanics who can work on them, a lot of parts available, and away you go, right? Now, when I was in England a few years ago, I met a guy, he just got himself a Toyota Corolla, and he loved it. And he said, I used to have all kinds of different cars, but I like this Toyota Corolla best. Nothing wrong with the Toyota Corolla, but, best is a relative thing. Maybe you want to impress people. You're not going to be impressing people with a Toyota Corolla. Then you want a fancier looking car, right? But if you want pure transportation, yeah, you can't beat a Toyota Corolla. Solaris says, Scotty, what are your thoughts on an 03 BMW Z4? They're fun little sports cars to drive around, right? But they are BMWs. That's a 21-year-old BMW. They're endless money pits as they age. The parts cost a fortune. Mechanics who work on them rip you off because they know they're so complex to work on. You can generally get those things cheap if you're talking about buying one because nobody wants them who understands cars. They know they're endless money pits. But on the other hand, they're sports cars. Some guys don't drive them much, like Corvettes. And even though it's 21 years old, if it's got low mileage, it can be a fun toy. My grandson buys BMWs all the time. He buys and sells cars all the time. And he likes the BMWs because they're fun to drive. He drives around, then he sells them on, then he finds another one. He gets them cheap, rides them a while, sells them for a little bit more than what he paid for them, and away he goes. Still gambling. He could get a crapper. He's got a couple crappers that were junk that he didn't make too much money on, but he knows a bit about cars. If you don't know anything about cars, I would not buy a BMW Z4. Mike McNee says, are you a fan of Miata still? Yeah, I like Mazda Miatas. I didn't think about buying one time. But since came to be, I'm too cheap to buy a new car, right? Convertible tops, fun to drive. They can last a really long time. Now, the older ones had really crappy automatic transmissions, right? The newer ones, the automatics are much better. I would still get a manual transmission with one. They're a little sports car. They're a lot of fun to drive around, and they do hold up. They're the only two-seater roadster convertibles in the world that ever sold more than 1 million. They don't sell that much roadsters, and they did, and they're still making them. Cam Talk Sports says, Scotty, I got a problem. My fuel gauge, my 05 GMC Envoy, it's not reading right. Do you think the fuel level sensor is bad? That's normally what it is, because it's a float, right? And it's got a variable resistor, and as it floats up, the resistor has a different resistance, and that shows how much fuel you have. Well, think about it. You have an electrical part that's soaked in gasoline. That's generally the thing that wears out. It's got moving parts. It's electronic. It's soaked in gasoline. It's almost always the sender inside the gas tank. But unfortunately, it is an Envoy. And in order to replace it, you got to drop the gas tank, which is a gigantic pain in the butt. So a lot of guys will just use a trip odometer. They'll fill up with gas. They'll push the trip odometer. They'll know after so many 100-something miles, they got to fill it up. They fill it up again rather than spend a whole bunch of money dropping the tank and putting a sending unit in. Hijinks Chronicle said, ever had problems with steering lock after replacing the steering rack? Well, I never had because I always make a point of doing this. If I'm going to replace the steering rack, I jack the car up and I turn the steering wheel so it's pointed directly straight and the wheels are straight. Then I will get rope or bungee cords or whatever, and I will lock the steering wheel in place so it's not going to move. So then, when I put a new rack on, I make sure each end of the rack where the outer tie rods go on are exactly the same distance out, so you know that's centered. Then when you put it together, it's centered, and it won't be off-lock, off-center when you put it back together again. That's a real good way of doing it. Boss Prank says, my car cuts out sometimes when I slow down, but there's no engine light. Okay, a lot of times you're not going to get engine lights for minor things like that. You said sometimes. So it's not something that's consistent. Like say you had a vacuum leak. It would do it all the time because it would be sucking air, and every time you slow down, that extra air would make it stall out. So try my video. Make your car run better with a little spray cleaner. You get a can of mass airflow sensor cleaner and a can of throttle spray cleaner. They're different cleaners. It shows how you can clean the mass airflow sensor, how to clean the throttle. A lot of times that will fix it entirely. Very simple. And of course, check your air filter. A dirty air filter, do that. A dirty fuel filter, do that. Maintain the car and do that cleaner. You find most cars, that'll fix them. Alfred said, how much damage would a bad strut do to a new tire? It depends what's wrong with the strut. If it's physically broken and it's at an angle, yeah, it's going to wear it out fast because the tire will be sitting at the wrong angle. But let's say that it's worn out internally, so the seals are gone and it bounces too much. Well, bouncing will make your tire wear out faster, but not all that fast. Mainly, you're going to lose control when you go over bumps, and that's not safe. So, if you got a car that you drive down the road on the highway and it's fine, but then when you hit a bump at highway speeds, it starts shaking, time to change the struts because it's dangerous. You'll lose control at higher speeds. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.